Cultivate Wednesday with us. We are Alma La Vida for those of you coming to us from Eventbrite. We are a life, health, and wellness leadership and career coaching company. And my name is Justice, and I am the recent sales manager and a relationship strategist here. And what that means is when you initially schedule time to speak with someone on our team, you will end up on one of my team members' calendars, and we'll have a half-hour conversation around, what's put you in this position, what your goals are, and really just the obstacles that are in your way of achieving them. And then at the end of that call, we'll pair you up with a coach or coaches who we think are most appropriately suited to help you accomplish their goals, given their particular backgrounds, personalities, and skill sets. So with that being said, with the topic of discussion and everything going on, if anyone has anything that they can think of front and center that they want to get on the calendar for, it is first come, first serve. I'm going to go ahead and drop that consult link right there. And anybody coming to us from a webinar does get your first session free. So make sure that you indicate that when you're filling out your intake form. I will make sure that we get you all taken care of. With that being said, Laura, the floor is yours.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Just to confirm, everybody can see my PowerPoint fine? Yes. Yep. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. Let me change to the next slide. My name is Alma La Vida. My name is not Alma La Vida. I am one of the coaches from Alma La Vida. My name is Laura. I am one of the executive coaches here at Alma La Vida. I love to connect with individuals. I love to support you. So you'll see that my LinkedIn profile information is here. Please feel free to reach out and connect with me through LinkedIn. If you are interested in reading more about my bio, my information is on the website. So I encourage you to go to the website to learn a little bit more about who I am. And the reason we're here today, though, is to really focus in on change. Right now in the world, there is so much change occurring. So let's think about what are the top items that we're going to discuss today. Specifically, we're going to look at what happens during change. The next area is what is the impact of change management? And can change management really help us become change magnets? Can we really make this something that's feasible? Finally, there's going to be some steps to cultivate a positive mindset around change. Specifically, we're going to look at an 8-step change model that will help you be able to help your staff as well as help yourself manage through change. And then we will wrap it up. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of participating in an offsite training of my own, and the individual who was the facilitator there said, remember that unfortunately, in most of our presentations, only about 20% of the information that I share will be remembered. So right up off the very top, there are 3 takeaways that I want you to be able to achieve today. The first one is, what is your impact when you're planning change? The second will be, how are you going to be able to help others manage their way through change? And then the final is, where am I currently on understanding my thoughts around this change, whatever this change may be, and how can I ensure that my mindset is positive when I'm thinking about these changes? So I'll just say those are the top 3 things right off the bat that I want you to walk away with today. Let's go ahead and dive into the materials. And I know that this might be a little different than other presentations in that I am going to read a couple of questions. And what I'm going to ask you to do is engage. Please add comments, questions, input in the chat. That will help all of us be able to learn the most that we can learn through today's presentation. First off, what I'd like to know is thinking about any current change that your company or you are personally going through. Think about a scale, 1 being strongly disagree, 5 being strongly agree. And what I would like you to do is just put the average number after we read through the questions in chat regarding how you are currently feeling regarding a change that you're facing. First statement is leaders have clearly communicated what's going on and why. Next is I have clearly communicated the why behind the change to my team. I've inspired my team by creating and compelling a vision of what the future will look like after this change is implemented. I've spoken to all the individuals one-on-one and helped them understand what the impact of change is going to do on them for them. I've pushed the impacts that need to happen to my team and raised it up so that it's the most important item that I'm talking about. If the leadership team was asked, they would clearly know the impacts of this change of for the entire company and be able to communicate it clearly. I'm keeping a close eye on my team and how the impacts are helping them daily. My team is able to manage their normal workload on top of these changes. The next one is I'm confident we'll move through this. And then finally, I feel equipped to handle challenges of change. So when you think about all of these different statements, and I know it's a lot, it's 10, I probably should have just done 5, but I couldn't stop. There was so many important items I wanted you to consider when you're facing a change. On average, would you say 1, you strongly disagree with the majority of those statements? Or would you say 5, you strongly agree with the majority of the statements that yes, you are doing all of those items? Go ahead and type that into chat now so that we can see, at least from a starting point, where are you feeling today? So I'm seeing a 3 in there. Other items, 2. Okay, thank you for sharing, Sarah, Elisa, of 3. So for the most part, I'm seeing 2s and 3s right in the middle of the road. So I'm glad you came today because my goal is truly going to be able to help you move to the 5 so that you can feel that you strongly agree with each of these statements and that you are going to be a change management expert. So the next question is, how are you going to do this? Let's dive into change. What is change? What is changing? How does this look? So when we first start to talk about change, I encourage you to think about it from this mindset. Is this a micro change? Is it a small change that's just going to impact maybe one person on your team? Maybe it's only going to impact your team and nobody else in the organization? Or is this a macro change that you're trying to roll out across the entire organization? And the reason that this is important is based on the way that you look at this is how you're going to be able to determine what steps need to be focused on. And when it came to all 10 of those statements, which one are the highest priority, excuse me, when it comes to managing change? Because there's going to be a difference when it comes to a micro change as opposed to a macro change. So we need to start by thinking about what is this change? The next area that we're going to think about is a reflection. And it's really thinking about, pardon me, leading the change. So let's think about a change that you've gone through previously. How did the leader help manage that change so that you embraced it? Go ahead and type in chat some of the items that that leader did. Did the leader help you understand how that change was going to impact you? Did the leader change the language that they were using so that whatever the change was being implemented into your everyday work? Or let's talk about maybe you were the leader in implementing a change. What did you do well? Did you take the time to address the specifics with change to your staff? As I'm waiting for the responses to show up in chat, what I will share is many times what ends up happening is as a leader, we have been preparing for change, whatever the change initiative is, for a much longer period of time than our staff. And so, unfortunately, by the time that we're announcing the change to our staff, it no longer feels like change to us because we've been talking about it for the last several months among the leadership team. So it feels like it's okay, we're just into the next step. We're ready to roll this out. And we sometimes forget that our staff is at the beginning stages of being able to understand change. So let's see here. It sounds like a couple of items that were added to chat. Asking for input, allowing others to be involved, talking openly, fabulous way to keep people engaged. Another person, Ashley, wrote, at one point we were asked to prioritize where we wanted to see ourselves in the change. Absolutely love that comment. In fact, if everybody hasn't already written that one down, I would encourage you to do so. That is critical. What a great way to help individuals buy into the change. Nothing positive. The change was done to me without discussion when I was in maternity leave. And I shouldn't say thank you for sharing, but thank you for sharing. It's awful that you had to go through that experience, but that is what happens more often than not. It goes back to what I was just talking about. Leaders have already they have been so ingrained in the change for so many weeks and or months coming up to the announcement and the rollout of the change that they forget the impact to the staff. And so there is no discussion, there is no involvement regarding what's happening. And that can be very disheartening for individuals when it comes to change management. And you guys have already been adding this in. When you're thinking about change, you need to think about it as a leader from two different perspectives. The first off is you do need to embrace the fact that change impacts you. And how are you going to handle the change? What does it mean to you? What are your thoughts and attitudes? Do you understand why the change is happening? And more importantly, because you do understand it, how are you going to communicate that? And as always, as a leader, how are you going to show up for your team? I'll share with you recently, one of my clients has been going through some change in her current job, her current experience. And specifically, though, she had shared with me that her upper leadership was going to change. They were aligning her division with a different leader. And so she felt pretty confident. She understood the change. She felt very good about it. And when we started talking about change management for her staff, and she said, "Oh, but nothing's going to change for my staff. I'm still the person they're going to connect with. So, no, I haven't really shared much with them." And so we were able to really dive into this next screen, which is, well, even though the change is only impacting you, what impact might it have on your team? Will there be an impact? Do they understand why there has been this shift? And I just love Jennifer put in the comments, gray area can create rumors among staff that are inaccurate. Bravo, that is so correct. So even though the individual felt like the change wasn't going to impact their staff because it was only a change for their management, that's all, there is an impact to staff. And if you keep some of these items quiet, and I shouldn't even say quiet, it wasn't as if they were keeping it secret. They just didn't think there would be an impact to the staff. So why share it? If you're not able to help the team understand the why, the team will have this gray area and they will fill that void with negative thoughts or inaccurate thoughts. Being able to communicate change isn't only when change is happening to your team. Once again, it goes back to that micro and macro. So let's go ahead and talk about the next area. We've all heard this, change is constant. We are always going to be impacted by change. What is it that always gets us, though? Why is change sometimes so difficult for us? And actually, a lot of it, love it, Ashley, fear of the unknown. Beautiful. Many of you have been commenting about this in chat already. Why is it challenging? Because we're not being involved in it. We don't know what's occurring. It might impact us or it might not, but we don't know that. So there's always going to be issues. Now, when it comes to change, another area that I like to encourage everybody to consider is it really a change or is it a transition? And it took me a minute when I thought about this. It's like, this is an interesting way to present this because is there really there a difference between these two words? Well, there is. So let's dive into this a little deeper. Change is the external event or situation that's going to take place. It might be a new business strategy. Sorry, I have allergies, so my eyes are tearing a little bit. It might be a change in leadership. Maybe it's going to be rolling out something exciting. Maybe it's going to be a change of new product. So change doesn't always need to be a negative, but it is an external event or situation. And it can happen very quickly, or it can happen over a long period of time, depending, once again, is it a micro change or is it a macro change? The other item is transitions. What's the difference? What is a transition? A transition is really an inner psychological process that people go through as they internalize and start to come to terms with the new situation. So, as change external environments provide the pressure to us internally, we start to have this internal transition on accepting and embracing the change. So, how do we get to that point? And how do we as leaders or as individuals get to that point? And more importantly, how do we as leaders help our team get to that point where they can have that internal transition and embrace the new change because they have clarity around it, they understand it, and they can see the positive impacts from it. The way that we do that is through change management. As you study change management, you'll discover that there are a variety of different uh, models available for you to follow. So I'm going to be sharing a couple of them with you today. First off, we're going to look at the elements of change. And specifically, it comes down to the ABCs. The first one is change alignment. Does this change align with the organization or the team? The next one is being change execution. Does this change, how do we execute it? How do we roll it out so that it is impactful and meaningful for the staff? And then the final is the human change, the human component of that transition point. How do we get the buy-in? How do we help individuals travel that transition to be able to positively move forward with the change? And Jennifer, I do see your item, your in chat. Some pushback experienced with change has been, why fix something that isn't broken? Right on target. Many individuals do believe, why change it? It's been working perfect. But we all know that in this global economy, we need to be able to change in order to achieve what's going forward, in order to be competitive, in order to keep growing as an organization. And even let's bring it back to the individual level. Change needs to happen individually, because I don't want to be the same person I was when I was 20, when I'm 30, 40, or 50. So the change is also an evolutionary process that it happens, and we need to embrace it. It's hard. And when we think of change just based off of our 20s, 30s, 40s, it just kind of happens. And we reflect back and, oh, that we really did change. At the time, we didn't realize it. In the business setting, change is far more pushed on us, is the way that I'll put it. And that might make it sound negative. I don't mean to have it come across sounding negative, but many times change is something that happens to us. And so it's harder when it's happening to us as opposed to when we're transitioning through it. So the closer that we can help our staff transition through the change, the easier it will be. And that comes to the change alignment piece. As a leader, part of what's important with change alignment is having a roadmap. As much as we would love to be able to say we can wing, I've got this. I love the change that's coming. I can just help the staff get through it. The more you can create an actual roadmap and provide that information to your staff, the easier it will be for others to embrace, the easier it will be for everybody to use the same language as you're moving through the change to help individuals make that transition. And the key to that roadmap is to remember you must master your why and your what's in it for me. Now, what's in it for me as a leader is what you would be telling the staff, what's in it for them. Now, as a leader, you've probably already internalized what's in it for you. As you're sharing it out with the staff, you need to help them understand what's in it for them. So WIIFM. It's one of the acronyms that many of us use frequently to help other individuals see the value and buy in to the situation. Back to the comment somebody said, their change, the company asked for their input. They asked for their feedback. And in doing so, that gives me, the individual, the ability to share what's in it. What do I see the impact? And from my lens, from my view, this is what I see the outcome to be. So as you said earlier, we started in why is this so challenging? With so many different models, by now we should be able to handle this. And we did one item that somebody posted was fear. Fear is one of the biggest reasons why individuals struggle with change. However, there are other reasons why change can be hard. Uh, Possibly your leadership isn't fully on board. So they may be moving through the motions, but not completely committed. Or maybe you, as the leader, you haven't fully bought into the change. So then it's hard to bring your staff along with the change. In that case, you need to be able to truly reflect for yourself. What is this change? What impact does it have? What's holding me back from embracing this change? How can I change my view on this situation so that I can ensure my staff will embrace it as well? Change whiplash is something that has been very true, especially unfortunately over the last several years. Change has been occurring at such a rapid rate that it's hard to keep up. One of my clients works in the financial service sector, and throughout COVID, there have been a lot of regulations. And she finally actually decided to get out of that industry. And that was, I was helping coach regarding transitioning to a different career because change was happening so rapidly with all of the regulations, federal, state, so forth and so on. She just couldn't keep up. And she was starting to feel very burnt out. Um, we need to be aware of that as a leader. Have have we been rolling out so many changes recently with our staff that they could be experiencing change whiplash? And when they do, they start to become numb to it. And worse yet, they start to disconnect. They start to disengage. And as employers, as leaders, the worst thing that we could have happen is to have our staff not engaged. Because if they're not engaged in the change, it's going to be very difficult to have change be successful. So, some of the questions that you can ask yourself: are you aligning the change with your team? What is your plan? Do you know what the best practices are? Are there going to be some rewards and consequences? This next question is important for the staff. When change happens, not only is what's in it for me, what's the impact, but more importantly, what does success look like in this new vision of the world? Many times we roll out a product, for example, of change. This is a change. We're offering a new product, but we're not really defining what does success look like with this product. The impact on you, staff member, is that you now need to sell this other product. You need to be able to define it for the customer, the end user. But what does success really mean? And why was this product the one selected to bring greater success, or was it? So being able to answer these types of questions help the staff align. And back to that transition, that internal transition, we're helping them understand the process, the logic, the steps that have been taken to get through to where we are today. So I'm going to just take a pause here and go ahead and type a 1 in chat if this is making sense so far, or type a 2 if you think we are going to need more information. Okay, so far it's making sense. Awesome. Thank you. I also like to know that we're still engaged and individuals are still with me. So let's move on to the second step. The second step of the ABCs of change was the execution piece. How do we execute change? Well, this is where the models come into play. And the model that I'm going to talk about here is the Cotter's 8-step model of framework for change. And this was based off of John P. Cotter, who is a Harvard professor. He defined these steps in his book called Leading Change. It is one of the premier change management books available. And what's wonderful is it's a basic structure to help you achieve change management. So we start at the top where it speaks of creating a sense of urgency. And in that spot, what we do is we need to create an environment where everyone is aware of what the situation was before and what motivated us to be able to make these change. One of the easiest ways to do this is to share with the staff the SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaks, opportunities, and threats analysis that was created that motivated the need for the change. By openly discussing this with your team, it helps them understand what thoughts were you having, what was the logic, and how did we land where we are today on this needing to be the change moving forward. In addition to that, by sharing the SWOT analysis, you would be able to help them understand where this is an opportunity that if you didn't take advantage of it right now, 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, it might no longer be an opportunity. It might be a threat to the company. And so having the basic SWOT analysis can help build the sense of urgency regarding why the change needs to be implemented. The next portion of it is moving into building a coalition or building a team of individuals that can help answer questions, provide input, and set in place the motion of the future change. We all know that in most companies, change happens at a top level. It is then pushed down, and leadership rolls out the change, and the staff accepts what ends up happening, or they have the change happen to them, as I mentioned earlier. If you're able to create a team, first off, they're able to understand why the change was necessary. And they are able to then carry out that message to their teammates. What it basically does is it creates a small army of individuals that can help carry the message forward regarding why it needed to happen, what the purpose of the change may be, how the goals will be set forth in order to know that the change is happening, and the measurements. And they can provide clear feedback back up to management as well as to everybody else regarding what are the concerns with the change, what are areas that might have been missed. Sometimes leadership, they think they've touched and they've addressed all of the items, but once you roll it out and you start talking to the staff, the individuals that are boots on the ground, they all of a sudden realize, oh, we forgot this aspect of it because the staff's asking questions that we may not have answers to. And so having this team put together helps you be able to address some of those challenges and ensure that there are no risks or impacts, unintentional consequences that haven't been thought through. The next area is forming a strategic vision. And in this area, it's really aligning the organization's core values with what this change is going to do. And it's ensuring that it fits into the core values, the mission, vision, and purpose of the organization. And then once again, it's sharing that information out to the team so that they can understand that this is part of the larger picture. Once again, we need to be able to help staff understand the why, tie it back into the impact, and be able to see how it impacts them personally, what's in it for them, and how it's going to help the organization continue to grow into the future. Sometimes in this situation, it's a good time to start presenting data. What measurements were used to determine that this is a good way to move forward? The key to this is ensuring that it can be communicated in 3 to 4 sentences, read in maybe a minute or two at the most. It can't be something huge that becomes overwhelming. We need to be able to boil this down to the key points. What is the key impact that this change is going to have? Next area is the communication. And in that step, take every opportunity to communicate what's the impact, what's the new vision, how does incorporating this change help the organization and the individuals achieve future success. It's going to be important as a leader implementing change management that you're talking the talk and walking the walk. And what does that really mean? Well, first off, it means you need to have that self-awareness and that reflection. Do I agree with this change? Am I fully on board and embracing this change? Can I see the advantage for the organization? Can I see the advantage for myself personally? And more importantly, can I see the advantages for my team? And then share that, communicate it frequently. With every email that you send out, share once again, what's the impact of this change? Start encouraging feedback from staff. Be open to the hard questions that are going to be asked. Embrace the fear that the staff is feeling, maybe the anger, any of those emotions that come up, and listen. Listen to them so that they feel heard and they can work through the emotion and make that internal transition to be able to embrace change. After that step, you're going to start removing obstacles. So that's on the screen, enabling action by removing barriers. So when you're thinking about removing obstacles, it's going to be understanding the internal obstacles that may be the naysayers on the team. Maybe those individuals will need to have some additional one-on-one time, coaching time with you as the leader to help them embrace the change. But it's also going to be listening to the feedback, the concerns from the staff, and starting to really focus on those items that they've brought up as concerns. And this is a great time back to the coalition, the group that you brought together to start the team. Bring them back in and ask for ideas on how they recommend overcoming some of these obstacles. Get their feedback, ask them to write the processes, ask them to write the procedures. The more you can involve the group, the more they will be able to buy into the changes. Also, don't forget that there always with changes, there's going to be some type of reward system potentially, some type of impact that will be a gain for the organization. Make sure that you get that documented as well. And then, most importantly, remember to recognize the efforts of the team on overcoming these barriers. Not only is it fabulous that they're able to see what the obstacles are, they can provide the feedback, but allow them to overcome them and recognize those successes. Generate short-term goals and wins. This is pretty simple. As you're going through change, don't just have that long-term one goal in mind. Set milestones so that you can have celebrations along the way. The best way to help people embrace change and to help keep yourself positive about change, especially as a leader, when you've just come through all of the obstacles and you're seeing all of the negative uh, impact of the change, celebrate the small wins as you go through the steps. Make sure that, once again, you're recognizing the efforts of everybody. Continue to walk the walk, talk the talk, and encourage employees to recognize one another on their small steps towards achieving the greater goal. Sustain the acceleration, keep the momentum going. This is normally where change management drops off, because most people think, okay, well, we've gone through the full cycle. We've celebrated, we've set the milestones, we're celebrating those successes. Phew, we're done. If you don't implement ways to keep the process moving forward, it will stop, especially on a macro change that is going to be a company long or a possibly a year long change. Another client that I'm working with currently is going to be implementing a change of a data processing system update. And for those of you that are with us today that have gone through that, you know, first off, it is a long change. It takes about a full year process to implement the entire change. Individuals who are in the midst of the change feel all of it, and then the end users won't feel the change for about a year. So you've got different people at different levels and different steps through the change management cycle. It can be very difficult to keep the momentum alive. So what you need to be able to do to keep this momentum and acceleration going is evaluate what's working well, and make sure that as you see what's working well, you keep doing that. When you see something that's not working well, analyze it. Once again, celebrate the failures just as much as the successes. Either improve it or brush that one off, put the new processes that are working well, and continue to push forward to achieve the end results. Finally, making it stick, creating the institution change. What this really brings down to, what it boils down to, I should say, is the culture change that happens. How do we have the culture change so that this is no longer an actual change? It's just the way that we now do business. For simple things such as rolling out a new product, that can be simple. It's a short-term item. It's something that's now just part of the menu, part of the product that's being offered. For other changes that are maybe less tangible, maybe it's a sales culture that's trying to be implemented, where it's not quite as tangible. It could be, it takes an awful lot in order to make it stick. And the best way to do that is to document it as if this is now the way the organization works. So as we move forward, What does this mean? You're not going to want to skip any of these steps. Understand that there is no such thing as a perfect launch. There's going to be surprises along the way, and that's okay. Embrace those surprises, see what works well, and move forward. So that will be your role in this piece of the change management. Summing up the human change piece. And there is a actual William Bridges transitions. And this talks about what happens from the human side. I'll go ahead and go to this slide. I feel it's the best visual on it. You need to understand when it comes to transitions, the staff is going to go through an ending phase where they're ending one process that they knew. They probably knew it like the back of their hand. They didn't even have to think about it. It was something that they could easily do. And what that does when there's an ending, then there's going to be uncertainty about, well, wait a minute, this is how I've always known to do it. What impact does that have on me in the future? Which causes skepticism. And as you go from skepticism, though, you're starting to move into what's called the neutral zone of transition. And what's going to happen as individuals first become skeptical, you as the leader continue to have those questions. You talk to them, you have empathy about the challenges that they're facing, about even the sadness that they may be facing of ending something, the uncertainty or the fear that they're facing, moving into something new. You support them and listen to them. And as that starts to happen, the individual is going to start to explore new options. Once they start to move into the exploration phase, they're now moving into what is considered the new beginning. And as they move into the new beginning, that's where it starts to become the culture. It starts to be embedded in the company. And then finally, they move to commitment. So as a leader, what you need to be able to do specifically in this area is in the ending phase, lead with empathy. When the individuals start to move into the neutral zone, where they're having skepticism initially, be patient, reassure them, provide lots of feedback, and ask lots of questions. And then once they're in the new beginnings phase, make sure you reinforce when you're seeing them do it right or you're seeing them embrace the change, celebrate, acknowledge the efforts that they've put out there. And in doing so, it will make this the new norm for the future culture. So as your role, you need to lean into the one-on-ones, actively listen. Communication is key. I've done several different seminars, webinars recently, and I will tell you that almost pretty much every single one, I will tell you communication is key for everything. Make sure that you recognize your team when they're doing things in the new way, the new change. Make sure that you also understand emotions will run high. People who are normally calm, patient at work may be a little bit on edge. Understand that this is going to be normal, and that's them moving from the ending into the neutral zone. Communication, empathy, active listening. And then the bottom one, as a leader, you need to coach, not manage. Coach them through this change. So, as you think about a change that is coming up, how are you going to align your staff? How are you going to align yourself personally? What are you going to do to execute the change? How will you help your team get on board? Make sure that as you're going through the 8 steps, you're considering what might go wrong or what hasn't been asked yet, what needs to be addressed. Get that feedback from the staff. Change is consistent. And this has been said several times. Don't underestimate the power of your one-on-one coaching conversations. When you're going to lead, remember, leadership starts with you. Make sure that you know how you're going to build your awareness, your resilience. Get ready for the change personally. Embrace the change. Prepare yourself for the emotions that you're going to go through, because it's going to be the same thing for your staff. Wrapping up, I always have a takeaway. I want you to just sit down and think, what are you going to start doing to support some type of change? What are you going to stop doing? And what will you continue to do specific to change management? So with this, I will conclude. We have about 7 minutes left. I'd love to be able to answer any questions. Justice, I'll have you come back on if you're able to. Good. Have you seen any questions show up in chat that I can answer?
We just got one right up here from Jennifer. It says, how do you get staff on board to be honest and straightforward instead of worrying about offending people?
Fabulous question. So having staff be honest and straightforward really goes to creating a trusting environment. If for some reason they are weary or they are concerned that they are not going to be heard or taken in the right way, they may not be honest. So really the best way to have them be honest is, first off, embrace differences. Some individuals, if it's in a group setting, they're not going to want to necessarily speak up. Maybe have more one-on-ones. The second item, though, is in having those one-on-ones, build that relationship, build that trust so that they know when they are providing that feedback, you're not going to use it as a gotcha, something happened. You want that feedback. You need their input in order to improve. So it does come back to building a trusting work environment. I hope that answered the question. If not, put something else in there. Oh, Justice, I think you're speaking, but I think you're on mute.
Yes, I was. Thank you. Additionally, it said, should you ask if you can address concerns anonymously?
Yes, definitely. Having individuals be able to have a forum where they can present items in an anonymous format is definitely helpful. And with technology, we have that ability today. Back in, I shouldn't say it this way, back in the days when I first started, there was a suggestion box and people could put items in there anonymously. Nowadays, there's technology that can help us do that in a quick, rapid format, and we can be able to provide an instant feedback on that.
Thank you. And then I'm gonna drop the links that everyone would need in case they do want to hop on my calendar, or there is the event or the link to go to our website, our YouTube page, and or the Eventbrite if you are interested in seeing some other events that we have. So here are those links right there for you. And then there is one other question that did come up. It says, how do you distinguish between a macro, which affects many people, but it's a small process change, versus a larger organization or skill set change? Do you have an example of that?
Terrific. Yes. So being able to determine a micro versus a macro change. basically it is going to be based on, is it impacting a large group or a small group of individuals? That might be one way to look at it, because this process can be taken into consideration where just you as a team may be implementing a change that is just going to impact you and your team. It's not going to impact the entire organization. Well, from an organizational view, that's a micro impact or a micro change. However, to your team, that may be a macro change because you may be completely changing. Let's say your team is the only team that uses a customer service CRM, a customer relationship management software, and you're completely changing it out. That could be a huge impact. So understanding who is going to be impacted by it is going to really help you determine if it's a macro change or a micro change. And then based on that, knowing the level of communication that you would need to have throughout the organization or through the teams is going to help. Let me know if that didn't answer the question. I hope that did.
There's one more question right before we end here. It says, do you go through all these steps even when it's a small change that affects many people?
I almost want to tell you, you're not going to like this answer, but yes. And the reason I tell you, yes, you need to go through those steps is because the more often you implement the steps, you get into the habit that this is now going to be the change management framework. And while you do it for little steps or little change, macro changes, or pardon me, micro changes, they might not be as drawn out, but it forces you to go through all of the steps. And what that does is when you do have a macro change, a major change, you've already practiced all of the steps and you know how to get through it. You're making sure that you're not skipping any of them. In my opinion, in order to be the most thorough, you should always take all 8 steps.
And then, Jennifer, to answer your question, we will have an email that goes out that has the recording, as well as extra materials that we think would, go along with this particular webinar. So just be on the lookout for that email. But other than that, thank you so much for your time today, Laura, and thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your day and week, and hope to see you at a future event.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciated the engagement. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.